Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am Dr. Hind Hassan, Assistant Lecturer of Human Anatomy and Embryology. We will carry on the practical topics of neuroanatomy, and the topic to be discussed will be the diencephalon and its cavity, which is the third ventricle. Firstly, we should remember the diencephalon as it developed from the prosencephalon or the forebrain. Before, we mentioned that forebrain or prosencephalon gives the telencephalon and diencephalon. So, diencephalon will be communicated with the cerebral hemispheres, or its cavity will be continuous with the cavity of the cerebral hemispheres. Its cavity, which is in the midline, the third ventricle, will communicate with the cavity of the cerebral hemispheres, which are the two lateral ventricles, through this foramen, which is the interventricular foramen of Monro. While you see these derivatives of the prosencephalon, you will find that the cerebral hemispheres grow laterally and downward. So they cover the diencephalon from the lateral aspect. So if you take a sagittal section in the brain and you would like to see the diencephalon, you will never see the diencephalon from the lateral surface because the cerebral hemisphere hide the diencephalon. So the only method to see the diencephalon is to take a sagittal section, and also you look at the medial surface. So this is the diencephalon and its cavity, which is the third ventricle. What about site and boundaries of the diencephalon? Here is the diencephalon. It is located between the cerebral hemisphere cranially and the midbrain caudally. What about boundaries? Remember, firstly, that the cavity of the diencephalon or the third ventricle will lies in the midline. So diencephalon is related medially to the third ventricle. What about other boundaries? Anteriorly, you will find two structures. This is the lamina terminalis, and this is the anterior commissure. What is lamina terminalis? Lamina terminalis is the closed anterior neuropore of the neural tube. What is the anterior commissure? It is example for the commissural fibers, which connect the same areas in the two cerebral hemispheres. Anterior commissure connects the two temporal lobes together. What about the posterior wall? You will find another commissural fibers like the posterior commissure. Posterior commissure connect the two oculomotor nuclei for the upward gaze, connect also the two superior colliculi, and collect the Edinger-Westphal nucleus and pretectal nuclei on both sides for the direct and indirect light reflex. Also, above the posterior commissure, you will find a gland called pineal gland. This gland secretes a hormone called melatonin. This hormone is called the hormone of darkness, which induces sleep. And above pineal gland, you will find a nucleus called habenular nucleus. It is a part of limbic system, and as we know from before, that limbic system is concerned with emotional behavior, olfaction, and memory. So this is the anterior wall, lamina terminalis and anterior commissure. These three structures form the posterior wall. What about the roof? We will find a structure called body of the fornix come in the roof of the diencephalon, and we will know the fornix and its parts. And also in the roof, we will find the thylakoid of the third ventricle. Thylakoid is responsible for secretion of the CSF, and we mentioned before in the fourth ventricle that we have choroid plexus. What is the difference between thylakoid and choroid plexus? The difference is in the structure. Both are formed of ependymal layer, because the ependymal cell line any ventricle. Both contain capillary network, but the difference in that the thylakoid is formed of two layers of the pia mater, while choroid plexus is formed of only one layer of pia mater. So the roof is formed of thylakoid, body of the fornix, as well as the cavity of the cerebral hemisphere, which will be the lateral ventricle. So these three structures form the roof. What about the floor? We know the floor before from the structures that form the interpeduncular fossa. If you remember, optic chiasma, tuber cinereum, and infundibulum of the pituitary gland, mammillary body, and the posterior perforated substance. Let's know now that the posterior perforated substance is perforated by the central branches of the posterior cerebral artery, So remember that you have lamina terminalis and anterior commissure anteriorly, posterior commissure pineal gland and habenular nucleus posteriorly. You have in the roof thylakoid body of the fornix and lateral ventricle. You have in the floor structures forming the interpeduncular fossa, and medially you will find the third ventricle. What is the fornix that has a part called body forming the roof of the diencephalon? The fornix is example for association fibers. Association fiber is example of nerve fibers that connect two areas in the same cerebral hemisphere. Fornix connect the hippocampus with the mammillary body. It is considered to be part of limbic system. What is the hippocampus? Hippocampus is the area that I told you that it is situated inside the parahippocampal gyrus. What is the mammillary body? Structure inside the interpeduncular fossa and part of limbic system. So, fornix has different parts. It starts firstly as fimbria. Fimbria covers the medial surface of hippocampus. So, deep in the parahippocampal gyrus, you will find the hippocampus. And medial to the hippocampus, or the medial surface of the hippocampus, is covered by fimbria, the part of the fornix. Then fimbria proceed as crus of the fornix. Then the two crura united below the splenium of corpus callosum to form a body of the fornix in the midline. And so this body lies in the midline and so forms the roof of the diencephalon here. After that, the body divides again into columns of the fornix, and each column will terminate at the mammillary body. So we have fimbria, crus, body, and column of the fornix. Fimbria, again, crus, body, and column. What about parts or divisions of the diencephalon? This is the diencephalon in the sagittal section. We will find that we have the major part of the diencephalon, which is the thalamus. Below and anterior to the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus. And both are separated by this sulcus, which is called the hypothalamic sulcus. Hypothalamic sulcus starts here at the interventricular foramen of Monroe and terminate at the aqueduct of Sylvius. What other divisions? To know other divisions, we will take a coronal section. Coronal sections here, we have a coronal section dividing the brain into anterior and posterior parts. We will find paramedian thalamus and hypothalamus. And we will find lateral to the hypothalamus, the subthalamus. It is the third division of the diencephalon. And if you look well, you will find the cavity of the diencephalon, which is the third ventricle in the midline, which is related laterally to the thalamus above and the hypothalamus below. Also, you should know that both thalami are connected with each other by what we call it massa intermedia or interthalamic adhesions, and these glial fibers cross the midline and traverse the cavity of the third ventricle. This is called massa intermedia. It appears here in the sagittal section as this round structure. This is the massa intermedia connecting the two thalami. These are glial fibers connecting the two thalami, traversing the cavity of the third ventricle, and they are non-functioning. So we have thalamus, hypothalamus, and lateral to the hypothalamus we have the subthalamus, and the last division of the diencephalon will be the epithalamus. What is the epithalamus? If you remember the posterior wall of the diencephalon, you will find group of structures like the posterior commissure, the pineal gland, the habenular nucleus, and also don't forget these fibers. These fibers are called stria medullaris thalami, and don't forget that we mentioned before stria medullaris of the fourth ventricle. They are present in the floor of the fourth ventricle. But here stria medullaris thalami is a part of the epithalamus. These fibers connect the habenular nucleus to the septal area. Septal area is an area present below the rostrum of corpus callosum. What is this cavity? This will be the fourth ventricle that communicates above with the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius and below with the central canal of the spinal cord. Let's see. This is basement. This is a sagittal section in the brain. This is the right cerebral hemisphere. This is the right cerebellar hemisphere. These are the sulci and gyri present on the medial surface, as we mentioned before. This is the corpus callosum and its four parts, as rostrum, genu, body, and splenium. And so this region will be the diencephalon. When you look, you will find the major division of the diencephalon, which is the thalamus. Anterior and below, this will be the hypothalamus. And to see the subthalamus, you should take a coronal section to find the subthalamus deep here, deep to the hypothalamus, or in the coronal section, lateral to the hypothalamus. About the boundaries, these are the structures in the interpeduncular fossa forming the floor of the diencephalon. Okay, what about C? C is a nucleus called caudate nucleus. It is not a part of the diencephalon, but it is seen in this section because it lies lateral to a part of the cavity of the cerebral hemisphere, which is the lateral ventricle, and we will see this later. Look at this model. We take a sagittal section in the brain, and this will be the left half of the brain. Look at this region. It is the region of the diencephalon. Diencephalon is located between the cerebral hemisphere superiorly and the midbrain inferiorly. Let's see some divisions of the diencephalon. This is the largest division. It is called thalamus. In anteroinferior to thalamus, we will find here the hypothalamus. What about subthalamus? We cannot see the subthalamus here because it doesn't appear in the sagittal section. We need a coronal section because subthalamus lies lateral to the hypothalamus. What about this? This is the hypothalamic sulcus dividing thalamus from the hypothalamus. What about this? This will be the massa intermedia or the interthalamic adhesions which connect the two thalami and cross the cavity of the third ventricle in the midline. Let's see some boundaries of the diencephalon. We will find in the roof this is the body of the fornix, and also this is septum pellucidum, which hide the cavity of the cerebral hemisphere lateral to it, which is the lateral ventricle. Also in the floor we will find structures in the interpeduncular fossa like optic chiasma, infundibulum of the pituitary gland. Also this is the mammillary body. What about the anterior wall? We will find the lamina terminalis and the anterior commissure. Thank you.